Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. It is 6:36 a.m. East Coast time, Friday, July 5th. So yeah, you had the 4th of July yesterday. Now it's a Friday for the weekend warriors. You get the whole weekend, 4th of July weekend. Hope you're having a good time. Hope it's warm wherever you are. Hope your July 4th was good. And maybe somebody watching made some money. So with that said, we're here. We have a 13-game slate, so not quite a full slate, but pretty much as close as you can get on this Friday evening. And I'm excited to break it down. I have right now 7 pitchers that I have listed out. I have 5 stacks that I have listed out. Again, these things are going to change closer to lock the more I do in-depth research today. And that will be in the article that I have on Patreon. It's linked down below. You can get this sheet over here over my shoulder, as well as my articles. What's in that is just pretty much my rankings on who I'm going to use in what order for stacks and for pitchers, and an analysis as to why. So you can get that down below. If you're new to the channel, welcome to the channel. My name is Sal Vetri. I cover NFL, NBA, MLB like you see, WNBA, which is just a 4-game slate tonight. It's a pretty good slate. I'll have that as well with a video most likely, and I'll have projections on Patreon for that. So that is who I am. I appreciate if you hit the like button before we get rolling. Biggest thing, if you could hit the red subscribe button, that helps me out a ton. I know the channel has been the growth of the channel over the past week or two with no NBA, with no NFL. This is the dead season, but we still have MLB, we still have WNBA. I'm excited to keep going during the summer, keep grinding this out. I think these sports are fun to play. Now we have Summer League. I know people have been asking me about Summer League. I'm most likely not going to cover it. I'm going to try and track all of the categories and things like that, but in terms of trying to break it down analytically, it's going to be difficult just because there's no database on most of these players who are rookies. That's number one. Number two, it's really just the eye test is what you're going for. There's no database on telling how the defenders are going to be and all that stuff. So for now, we're going to stick to the MLB, WNBA, and maybe after a couple of days, I'll get into the Summer League. But let's just get right into it. I'll go through these 7 pitchers. I'll talk about just some other spots that I find interesting, whether because I like them or not. And we'll start at the top with Justin Verlander. I have Verlander down as somebody I'm not going to be playing today. He's $12,000, and I love playing Justin Verlander. I mean, the guy's a 32.1% strikeout rate, right? He's striking out 36% of lefties. So in terms of this Angels lineup, it's going to be primarily right-handed, which you see a big platoon split to where he goes to 27.8%. 27.8% strikeout rate is still pretty good. It's still top 5 on the slate against righties. That being said, he is $12,000 facing a team that is last overall in the league in overall strikeout rate, in a park today that is going to be neutral, but if anything, the weather will help the LA hitters. What I have here is that LA is last in strikeout percentage, meaning strikeout percentage being the lowest strikeout percentage in the league, which is not good for pitchers, when you factor in that they're facing right-handed pitchers on the road, which is this exact situation here. And they're 6th in overall ISO. So when they're on the road facing right-handed pitchers, they're 6th. Now overall, when you look at their ISO, you might say, oh, they're only an average team, 178 ISO. The league average right now is like 173, 174. No, but when they're on the road versus right-handed pitching, which is a decent-sized sample at this point since we're halfway through the season now, a 0.2 or a 240 ISO, that's 6th best in the league. So I'm going to be avoiding Verlander today for those reasons on the opponent matchup, but also Verlander in his own right. Yeah, he goes deep into the games. Yeah, he has a nice strikeout rate. He has the lowest SIERA on the slate, but he's giving up 1.73 home runs per 9, right? 40% hard hit percentage and 46.4% fly balls. Some of that's skewed by his first month of the season, but either way, he gives up 224 ISO to righties, and there's going to be a lot of righties in this lineup. Like I said, those stats on the road, LA has been having more success against righties power-wise on the road, and it's a decent enough split for me to say, okay, there's actually something behind this. And again, they strike out the least most. So there's no way I'm going to be getting to Verlander today. Next up, I have Kershaw written down, and he's probably somebody I'm also not going to get to. Now, San Diego, their 23.6% K rate on the road versus lefties is 14th in the league. So they're pretty much an average team on the road against lefties in terms of striking out. Now, if you look at them, you're going to say, oh, they're actually one of the worst teams in the league, a 26.1% K rate overall. I get that. But when you factor in lefties, they're striking out less against lefties, which is interesting. And number two, when they're playing lefties on the road, they're striking out less. Again, you can say that these splits are not accurate. I think they actually are, because when you're changing ballparks, things are going to change as well when you're away from home, pretty much. So with that said, Kershaw, yeah, his strikeout stuff has been down this year, but he's been slowly picking it back up. He's been limiting the damage to lefties, which you're going to have a decent amount of lefties in the San Diego lineup, but you're also going to have a lot of power righties. I'm pretty worried for the matchup that Kershaw has today. And then you also take into account, when you look at this, that you're going to have the Padres having one of the higher ISOs, a top 10 ISO on the road versus lefties this year. And that's something that I don't want to go up against either. So I'm probably going to be avoiding Kershaw again, or as well. I haven't played him once, I don't think, this whole year. Now we get to the spot where I have my first interest, and it's Zach Greinke at 9,700 versus Colorado. Now keep in mind, this game is not in Coors Field. It would be a totally different interest, and really a disinterest, if this game was in Coors Field. But now you take these Colorado bats out of Coors Field, put them in Arizona, which has been playing very, very pitcher friendly this year, and I kind of like it. A 3.96 Sierra, that's top 5 on the slate. His strikeout stuff has been a little bit down, only 22%, but he's striking that out from each side of the plate, so at least he's not having a platoon advantage from one side. Only walking 3% of batters, 0.94 home runs per 9, so he's limiting the damage, and he's going 6 1/3 innings pitched per start. That's the third best on the slate. So his $9,700 price tag, look, it's a little bit overpriced, I would say, maybe by like $300-400 more than I would like, but at that price point, I'm hoping it keeps more people off of him. Colorado, so far this year, Colorado on the road versus right-handed pitcher has a 26% K rate. That's the 4th highest in the league, so that's very good. It's top 5 in terms of how pitcher-friendly it is. And then when you go back and you look into how they are in terms of ISO, how they are in terms of power hitting on the road versus righties, they're the 4th worst in the league. They're 27th in the league at a 150 ISO. So what this is telling me is that you're in a pitcher-friendly ballpark with a team that strikes out against righties, especially on the road, and they have absolutely no power when you take them out of Coors Field against righties. You have Zach Greinke as a 200 favorite today. It's the highest right there with Justin Verlander. He's my first interest on the slate. Second interest is going to be Erod. And actually, when I was looking at this sheet, I stated the Angels were the 6th best ISO on the road, again, in their matchup against Verlander. I was mistaken. I was looking at the Padres. The Padres are the 6th highest. The Angels are actually bottom tier. They're 22nd. So it's actually a little bit of a bump for Kershaw. They don't generate that much power on the road. They generate actually right around what they are generating on the year. But their strikeout stuff is still, in terms of their whole team, is still the least in the league against righties and on the road against righties. So I'm still going to be avoiding Verlander for that reason, because your upside comes from your strikeout ability. And he's still going to have that strikeout ability, but if it's limited at all, and he's still in a spot where he can give up power due to just his numbers, giving up power, 189 to lefties, 224 to righties, then yeah, I don't want to pay $12,000 for that. Can he go for a 30 burger tonight? Yeah, of course he can. He's Justin Verlander, and he has top 5 strikeout stuff in the league. I'm just going to avoid it for that price point as of right now. Again, this could change in the article later. Second guy I have interest in, $8,700 Eduardo Rodriguez. I think he burned some people his last time or 2 starts out. Look, I don't really have to tell anybody that Detroit against righties is the worst team in the league, right? They strike out the most against righties. They have the 2nd worst ISO against righties. So they're the worst team in the league against righties. Now, when you look at them against lefties, you say, okay, well, how bad are they against lefties then, to kind of filter out if they're the worst against righties and they have one of the highest strikeout rates overall in the slate, what is their lefties looking like? Well, Detroit is 5th in terms of striking out against lefties, so 25.4%, so that's pretty good. They're top 5 matchup for a pitcher. And then when you look at their ISO, they're 25th in ISO at 146, so they're bottom 6 in the league in ISO. They're top 5 in the league in striking out. Now you get Eduardo Rodriguez, who's been really good this year in terms of striking guys out, and a little bit better than you would expect. 25% from the left-handed side, 24.1% from right-handed side. Overall, it's a 24.7% strikeout rate. This team does not have power, especially at home against lefties, and they just do not have strikeout, or they do not have the ability to not swing and miss here. Now, Eduardo Rodriguez, he has some troubles in terms of giving up home runs. He is most susceptible to lefties. This lineup today for Detroit is going to feature a lefty and most likely Kristen Stewart, and you get maybe a Nico Goodrum. Outside of that, you might have a guy in the bottom of the order. Outside of that, there's not going to be any damage. Am I worried about a Nico Goodrum and a Kristen Stewart? Kristen Stewart, who has a very high strikeout rate in his own right? No, I'm not. I have a lot of interest in $8,700 Eduardo Rodriguez today. I think a lot of people will, just due to the fact that he's facing Detroit, and people know Detroit strikes out a lot, and Detroit is not good. Depending on where the interests come in on some of these pitchers, if Zach Greinke goes unowned, I'm going to be jumping onto Zach Greinke because I think his matchup is very, very underrated and very, very good today. If Eduardo Rodriguez comes in chalky, well, then maybe I just avoid Eduardo Rodriguez, start my lineups with Zach Greinke. Keep an eye on all that type of news. That's the second guy. And the next guy that I want to hit on is Martine Perez. He's the 3rd guy in my player pool today. Martine Perez gets Texas. So we were talking about how Detroit is the worst in the league versus righties in terms of strikeout rate. Well, that's Texas against lefties. They strike out by far more than anybody else. 32.9% of the time, this Texas team is striking out on the road versus lefties. That's the worst in the league, and it's the worst by like 3 percentage points. They're that bad. And then they're 12th in the entire league, so closer to middle of the pack in ISO, 177 ISO. So when you look at this Texas team, you see their overall ISO being 194, and that looks pretty high, right? But when you factor that into the rest of the league, and when you factor that into versing lefties, especially on the road, it's not nearly as good. So Martine Perez is a 162 favorite today for a reason. This Texas team is striking out a third of the time they're up at the bat. And Martine Perez this year, he has increased his strikeout stuff against left-handed hitters, 23.4% of the stuff time. And then his against righties for strikeout stuff, it's come down since the beginning of the year when he started off so hot. But there's other reasons to like Martine Perez today. you know his strikeout matchup is going to be boosted through the roof because this is the best strikeout matchup you could have if you're a left-handed pitcher. The ISO is just middle of the pack, and even then, Martine Perez limits damage, 0.71 home runs per 9. He's only giving up like 1 home run on the year to lefties and very, very little and minuscule damage to righties as well, in a ballpark that today should help out with pitching. At least it has so far this year, 1.16 in terms of the ballpark factor. Anything over 1 means it's above average in terms of being pitcher friendly for this season. I'm not talking all year long, and maybe this summer will affect some of that stuff, but so far for this season. And also, the only thing that you don't like about Martine Perez, for the most part, you wish he had a higher strikeout rate. Again, the matchup is going to help that out. You wish he had a lower walk rate. He's at 9.9%. You never like to see that, getting free base runners on base. It turns your solo shots when you make mistakes in fantasy that don't kill you into 3-run shots that do kill you. So Martine Perez will be the third pitcher in my player pool so far today. Dakota Hudson is somebody that I want to talk about, mainly due to his matchup, although these Giants have been really good as of late. Look, there's no upside in this matchup outside of the fact that he's pitching in San Francisco, which is probably the most pitcher-friendly ballpark on the slate, and he's versing these Giants that, at least for the most part, have not been that good. The Giants are 8th highest in K rate at home against right-handed pitchers. There's a really big sample size for this. So they have a 24.7%. So they're top 10. So although on this season, overall, looking at all their data, it doesn't look like this Giants team strikes out all that much. 23.2%. It gets boosted when they're at home against righties to 24.7%. That's top 10 in the league. That's something that I actually like to note and look at. They're 28th in the league at home against righties in ISO, so they're the third worst on 128. So again, we kind of know this because of the fact that they're hitting in this ballpark that is very pitcher friendly. This Giants team provides no upside, and then they now do strikeout top 10 in the league against righties at home. So what am I looking at here? Well, Hudson, he has no strikeout stuff, 16% overall. Where's your upside? There really isn't. The fact that he has an 18% fly ball rate, that's probably going to regress, but it's nice to see that he limits the damage in that regard. 61.5% ground ball rate, again, something that's nice to see, and he goes over 5 innings pitched per start. This is more of your safe play, right? He gives up 10% walks, which is something you don't want to see. He limits the damage somewhat, especially to righties, which is where most of the pop will come from this lineup. Look, this is your no upside spot to where you want 15 points if your pitcher can get a win. He's a small favorite here. If he doesn't get a win, you're looking to closer to 10 points. And there's always negative upside here with a guy like this, negative points, or negative downside, I guess you can say. So Hudson is the fourth guy in, but I have literally written next to him, there's no upside here besides the matchup in ballpark. ... Might be too expensive. So when you have no upside except the matchup in the ballpark, usually at 7,600, I'm going to avoid you. You'll slowly start to see on the rest of the slate, there's not many options. So he'll be in my pitcher pool as one of the 7 guys right now. But there's a good chance he's the one that gets busted out first. It's just because it's a matchup thing. There's no upside in terms of if he gives up 2 runs in this game, and he's only usually going 5 innings, he's not giving you upside because he's working deep into the game. He doesn't have upside in striking out guys. So those 2 runs he gave up, maybe a walk, maybe 2 walks because he has a 10% walk percentage, and then he gives up 2 to 3 hits. Well, now how do you get anywhere near 10 fantasy points, if not less? Because your upside for striking out is so low. Now the matchup is beneficial on the strikeout side, and they're limiting the power, so he'll stay in there for now, but I'm not thrilled about it. Fifth guy in is Drew Pomeranz. Pomeranz has looked really good against lefties this year, and just overall 30% strikeout rate against lefties, 24 overall in terms of his strikeout stuff, 24% against righties. So I have written down here for Pomeranz, you have St. Louis is 19th on the road against lefties this year in terms of strikeout rate at 22.3%. That's not great, right? They're pretty much bottom third in the league. And then they're 4th in ISO. So they have the 4th highest ISO at 193. So these things that you're seeing for Pomeranz in his matchup today against St. Louis, look, we knew they're a team that doesn't strike out anyways. But at least looking at it, you might think that they might be limited in ISO. Now, these numbers 4th on the road against lefties this year in terms of their overall power, that does worry me. But over the past month of the year, this whole team has really lost their power surge. You have Ozuna. I believe he's still on the injury list. So I'm a little bit worried about the St. Louis team themselves. I'm not too worried about San Francisco and Drew Pomeranz, who is a small underdog today against the other side of this, Dakota Hudson. You have to remember, even though he has a 2.13 home run per 9 and a 10% walk rate, at least he'll be pitching in San Francisco today, which should limit some of that upside. And then you get, though, a team that has power. So another matchup here, or another spot where I'm kind of on the fence. He's 6,800, so I do think I prefer Drew Pomeranz, and I actually do, to Dakota Hudson because of a couple reasons. They work just as deep into the games together, and he has just a much higher strikeout rate. That's pretty much it. Now, I don't like the matchup against St. Louis. Even though St. Louis has been struggling, there are still bats in this lineup that can get to him, but the ballpark should calm that a little bit. So you'd be the 5th guy in. Number 6 is Julio Teheran, and now you can see how just disgusting this slate gets down here. I don't want to pitch a Brad Keller versus the highest implied total Washington team And Keller has no strikeout stuff either. Brett Anderson against Seattle is not something that I want to do. Brett Anderson's strikeout rate overall is 10%. That's disgusting. Adrian Sampson versus Minnesota. I'm all over the Minnesota stacks. Vince Velasquez versus the New York Mets. Look, he has good strikeout stuff in terms of Vince Velasquez, but I'd rather target the New York Mets here against a pitcher who just gives up 2 home runs per 9, and it's really looked terrible since transitioning to a starter in his 9 innings of work. And those innings have been against the Miami Marlins, so that's not great. So Julio Teheran, huge favorite, 198 favorite, pretty much the second highest, if not right there, as a virtual tie with the biggest favorite on the slate with Verlander and Zach Greinke at minus 200. He gets Miami today. I don't have to really tell you how bad Miami is. They're last in the league in ISO overall. They're last in the league in ISO versus righties on the road, which is this exact matchup. And then they're 11th in the league in strikeout rate. So just missing out on the top 10, 24.6% on the road versus right-handed pitchers. And you're going to be getting Julio Teheran, who at least has some strikeout stuff compared to some of the guys down here in his price range, 20% overall, faces a team that should elevate that since they're top 11 in the league in striking out, last in ISO. Look, the ballpark today in Atlanta is going to be the most hitter-friendly ballpark on the slate with no Coors Field, so that worries me. The fact that Teheran gives up power to righties worries me. You're going to have Brett Anderson, Cooper, starting Castro in the middle of this lineup, who might actually be able to take him deep today. He only gives up 1 home run per 9, which is nice to see. 11.8% walk percentage is scary, and I think that's limiting him from going deeper into the games. A 5.27 Sierra is scary, but on a slate where 5 Sierras are really scary and I usually avoid, there is 10 pitchers out of 26 with the Sierra over 5, and one of them's at 4.96, so that could be 11 pitchers, right, if you wanted to count that one. That's pretty disgusting. So in terms of value, you're not going to find much upside value here outside of the guys who have good matchups, and I think Julio Teheran's at least worthy of, at least early on, being in a player pool. Then last but not least, I jump all the way down. Look, in terms of Pittsburgh or Pittsburgh versus Zach Davies, I'd rather target Pittsburgh here. Zach Davies struggles striking out lefties. He struggles with giving up power to lefties. And now Pittsburgh's going to be in a pitcher-friendly ballpark at home against him. I think I'd rather target that. Milwaukee versus Steven Brault. I don't really have an interest in either side here. Brault somewhat limits damage overall, and he strikes out more lefties than righties, which is going to benefit him against this Milwaukee lineup. But overall, I don't have any interest in either side. Arizona versus Sensatelli, I do have interest in Arizona because Sensatelli struggles striking out lefties, and he gives up power to lefties. And again, the top 4 out of 5 or 6 bats are going to be lefties in this lineup. Aaron Sanchez versus Baltimore. I've been trying to get to Aaron Sanchez. He's now gone negative points. He hasn't gone over 4 fantasy points in 6 or 7 straight starts. Negative fantasy points in 4 straight. You could have put a 0 in the last 4 games and scored higher, which is crazy. I'd rather stack Baltimore. And then you get all the way down here to Yusei Kikuchi. I believe that's how you say his name. Maybe not. He's the 7th pitcher in my player pool, and it's really just a price thing. I do not think he has a good matchup. There's nothing in here that tells me he does. Oakland is 3rd in ISO away versus lefties this year, so that means 3rd highest. Their ISO is a 223, or not a 223. Their ISO is a I don't have it written down. They're just 3rd I have. So they're 3rd highest. So that means they're top 3 in the league in power against lefties on the road, which is not good at all. And then you're going to play in a ballpark that'll limit that a little bit, but not too much, especially with weather getting nicer. And then Oakland is also 26th in strikeout percentage, 20.4% of the time. And this kid so far, at least for the first 1 or 2 starts, or however many starts he's pitched in, he has not had any strikeout stuff. 16% against righties, 17.6% overall, giving up power to both sides of the plate. So it's a factor of pricing here at 4,400. Can he get you 5 innings into the game and not really do too much in terms of giving up power? I don't think so. So I overall say stay away from this, but people are going to try and find a really cheap guy below 6K, and I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any guys below 6K worth playing, but if you were going to throw a dart, go all the way down to the bottom, because at least that guy's going 5 innings pitched per start. He has a very difficult matchup in terms of where he can find swings and misses in that Oakland lineup, and also limiting damage, because he himself gives up damage. Now you're facing a team who's top 3 on the road versus lefties in giving up home runs, or in terms of getting power, extra base hits. So very scary slate today. If I had to recap it in terms of the pitchers, Zach Greinke and Erod, I have interest in above everybody else on almost a different tier. And that leads me to believe I'll be paying up today at pitcher. The third one is Martine Perez, who I do have confidence in getting to just because the matchup is so bad. And Martine Perez in his own right has limited home runs. So the worst thing you're going to get out of Martine Perez is maybe 5 1/3, 5 2/3. Maybe he gets you 5 or 6 strikeouts, and hopefully he just doesn't give up any certain amount of walks and hits combined to get him tossed out of this game. I don't have as much confidence in him as Erod and Zach Greinke today, which leads me to believe maybe I don't get to as much of him. But I do have more confidence in him than anybody else I'm about to list, which is Dakota Hudson, Drew Pomeranz, Julio Teheran, and then Yusei Kikuchi at the bottom. And the guy I have the most confidence in at his price point, factoring in point per dollar, would be probably Julio Teheran, who has had success in this matchup versus Miami already a couple times this season. if I had to filter the player pool right now, those would be the 4 that I have the most interest in. Eduardo Rodriguez, Greinke, Martine Perez, and Julio Teheran, and then probably Drew Pomeranz. So that's where I'm at right now in terms of pitching. Quickly on stacks, and people say you spend too much time on pitching. Why don't you talk about hitting? It's 6 in the morning. I don't have any of the lineups today, so my interest in lineups literally changes if there's one value bat in a lineup and it lets me get to a higher stack. I don't have interest in individual hitters, so me saying these are my top 5 first basemen or like these are my top 5 second basemen, I personally don't care about that because for the most part, yeah, I project some players. I'm not entering 150 lineups, so I don't go off of those projections. All the projections show me is where is the value in terms of the upside for a stack. And I can kind of identify that through run totals, through pitching, and through projections, which don't do too much for me if I'm not max entering. So in terms of hitting, I write an article later in the day where I rank like top 5 or 6 of my stacks that I'm interested in, primary options, secondary options. Today, early on, I have interest in no specific order: Atlanta, Minnesota, Boston, the Mets, and Toronto. If you want to know why, I'll write my analysis later. Some of those teams will change, some of them will stay the same. But there's no reason for me to give individual hitter at specific position advice at this early in the morning because I don't know if they're going to be in the lineup. Half the guys can get scratched and not play later today, and then it's like, okay, why do I even talk about them? That's number one. Number two, I don't want people to just go and plug and play a bunch of different individual hitters because your best upside is through stacking. So that's what I want to be very, very clear on. I don't know the specific details in terms of the stack so far. I can give you early and initial news. For stacking, I pretty much go off of the matchup, off of the upside in the matchup, how I can fit guys into a lineup, which I don't know that yet because I don't know the batting order, so I don't know specific pricing. And then 3, just implied run totals. Those are the 3 main things, and I go through that. So this is where I'm at for pitching. Those are early stacks interests. Follow me on Twitter at SalVetriDFS. Below is the article on Patreon that I'll write later in the day in terms of my rankings for pitchers and hitters. Pitchers and hitters, yeah, that's right. And then that is where I'm at for now. So thank you. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. I really, really appreciate that. My name's Sal. Best of luck tonight, everybody. Peace out, gang.